Hello everyone! Welcome to another edition of Basagan ng Trip. My name is Leloy Claudio. I'm your host and I teach history at De La Salle University. As always, if you have comments, kung gusto nyo akong i-troll, kung gusto nyo akong kausapin, kung gusto nyo magbigay ng suggestions ukol sa kung anong dapat natin pag-usapan dito sa show na to, just tweet me at Leloy Claudio and I'll be happy to engage and oblige whatever request you may have. Now, what do I want to talk about today? Yesterday, I was on an Uber, dumaan ako sa isang bridge sa Manila, tapos nakakita ko ng graffiti. Napakalaking graffiti. Sabi, Duterte, fascista. And then I realized, we use so many terms to describe our president. Dictador, authoritarian, fascista, populist. We really need to break down what these terms mean because we can't just throw them around and be innocent about yung history at yung konteksto nito mga terms na to. So what I want to do today is break down 3 terms and then ask the question, can Duterte be classified under these 3 terms? The 3 terms are, number 1, authoritarian/diktador, pangalawa, pasista, and then yung pangatlo, populist. So yung first term, yung authoritarian leader or authoritarian or dictator, some people might create distinctions between these 2 terms, but I think the distinctions are very small, so let's treat them as synonymous, authoritarian and dictator. I think somebody who can be described as authoritarian is simply someone na naniniwala na dapat sinisentralisa ang power ng gobyerno sa kanya. In every government, maraming mga checks and balances, maraming sangay ng mga gobyerno. Sometimes there's a legislative, there's a judiciary, and an authoritarian doesn't like these particular checks and balances. So for example, si Ferdinand Marcos, he was a dictator because he didn't like the fact na hindi siya nung una ang pwedeng sumulat ng batas. Kaya nung siya ay naging diktador, essentially what he did under martial law was he could write his own laws and those laws would come to pass, right? So that's a form of dictatorship. So basically, anytime you centralize the massive powers and the checks and balances of government and you get your way as a result, and you don't like this dissent because you're used to getting your way, more or less you can be described as a dictator or an authoritarian. I think that's the simplest term. The second term, medyo mas komplikado, yung fascismo or yung fascism. These days, lalo na sa Communist Party of the Philippines at sa mga kaalyado nila, every time meron silang ayaw na presidente, tinatawag nilang pasista. But they really don't define what fascism means. Now, in order to understand kung ano ang fascismo, you have to go back into history. And the first time fascism was used was in Italy. And it was used to describe the party of the dictator Benito Mussolini and his followers. Yung tawag sa followers niya, fascisti. Sometimes they would also be called black shirts. Now, bakit unique yung movement ni Mussolini? Because Mussolini did one thing. He combined the authoritarianism of right-wing governments with the mass movement of left-wing socialist organizations. What do I mean by this? We already know what authoritarianism means, meaning you're trying to centralize the power, and most of the time you're trying to centralize the power under traditional sources of authority, like the church and the state. So that's what Mussolini did to a very great extent. But prior to Mussolini, right-wing governments did not have mass bases. Usually, ang mga supporters nila hindi galing sa grassroots. Ang supporters nila usually galing sa mga kapitalista, sa mga pare, sa mga religious. So that was the right prior to Mussolini. So if before, yung may mga supporters lang na galing sa masa ay yung mga left-wing groups, yung mga socialist groups, with Mussolini, his supporters became yung mga masa na rin. So peasants, the urban middle class, or sometimes even the urban poor, they would go out on the streets and protest in favor of the government. And the other element, of course, here is violence. These mass movements became violent. Yung favorite technique ng fascisti nung time na yon was, if makakita sila ng kalaban ni Mussolini, ang gagawin nila, gugulpihin nila, tapos kukuha sila ng castor oil, this was their favorite oil, they would pour the castor oil down the gullets of yung mga kaaway ni Mussolini hanggang sumuka ang mga ito. So very important yung grassroots movement. Hindi porket diktador ka, pasista ka na lang. A dictator supported by a grassroots movement is a fascist. Yung huli, populism. Now, the word populism is confusing for some people because they think if you are a politician and you do something popular, therefore you're already a populist. So therefore, kung mabigay ka ng government services, at sumikat ka dahil doon, populist ka na. Well, in a sense, all politicians want to become popular and do things that make them popular, at least in democracies. So trying to be popular does not mean populist. Although there are some populists na mahilig mag-dole out ng government services. There are examples like Hugo Chavez of Venezuela and to some extent Thaksin Shinawatra of Thailand. But I think when you talk about populism, it is, as Nicole Curato mentioned in a previous episode of Basagan ng Trip, it is a rhetorical style. It is a style of presenting yourself to the public. And I think this rhetorical style is yung style na hinahati mo yung mundo between an elite na binitray yung bayan and an average person na dapat ngayon marepresenta ng populist politician na yun. So, somebody who exhibits great populist rhetoric is, guess what? Mocha Uson, di ba? Sasabihin ni Mocha sa'yo, yung mga matatalinong journalists, binitray kayo nila dahil bayaran sila yung mga prostitute, whereas I represent the voices of the ordinary people. I'm not a journalist, I'm just an ordinary person. So, concomitant dun sa populism or kaakibat ng populism is yung disdain for yung traditional experts, traditional sources of authority. So, very common among populists to say, the more ka mag-aral, the more ka nagiging out of touch with yung masa, and dapat yung mga mainstream institutions should be challenged because yung boses talaga ng totoong tao ay galing dun sa baba. And so usually populists, as Nicole said in an earlier episode, they really disdain the people in power dahil they contrast themselves to power. Kaya yung mahirap para sa populista is what happens when they're already in power, right? When they become presidents. Okay, so now that we define these particular terms, pwede na nating itanong kung Duterte fits into these terms. A disclaimer before I move into that. I think na itong mga terms na to, you should judge them based not on a yes or no scale, but based on a sliding scale gradient. Some politicians are more populist than others. Some politicians are more authoritarian than others. So dun sa authoritarianism, I think Duterte, for me, and this is for me lang, but you can troll me if you disagree, he is trying to be an authoritarian leader in a sense that he is very fascinated by his capacity to centralize power and to silence dissent in other quarters. How do we know this? Pag hindi sumusunod sa kanya ang Supreme Court, nagagalit siya. In fact, I think yung attempt to impeach Chief Justice Melu Sereno is an attempt to strengthen his power relative to the judiciary. And yung kanyang mga favorite na panloloko, if we can call this panloloko, yung nationwide martial law, or yung revolutionary government whereby he will be able to set up a government that strengthens the executive. I think it's very clear that President Duterte prefers it that if the president can do many things na hindi chine-check ng other institutions of government. And so therefore, he has definitely has authoritarian tendencies. But do I think he's a dictator? Not yet. Even if he wants to be a dictator, there are certain elements within society that constrain him from becoming a full-on dictator. For example, it is very hard for him to declare martial law or a revolutionary government because the military has made it clear that this is not something they would necessarily support. If you note, the military in fact told Vice President Robredo that they would not support a revolutionary government. So even if President Duterte is fascinated and in fact probably has a significant part of him that wants to be like Marcos, a dictator, he can't pull it off. And one of the reasons why he can't pull it off is because he doesn't have the time. Remember, si Marcos naging diktador lang siya after around almost 10 years of being in power. So it takes time to be a dictator. Maybe Rodrigo Duterte does not have enough time to be a dictator even if he has absolute control of certain institutions like the police. Dun sa second term, medyo komplikado, fascist. So, pasista ba si Rodrigo Duterte? Sa tingin ko, categorically, hindi. Now, I know there are some people, apart from the Communist Party and their above-ground organizations, who have called Rodrigo Duterte a fascist, including a mentor and a friend I really respect, si Walden Bello, former Congressman Walden Bello, and sinabi niya, meron ng enough middle-class support, mass-based support si Duterte para maging pasista. Pero sa akin, it's not just about yung middle-class support. So, it's true that Duterte has middle-class support and that this support is being used against liberal democracy. But I think yung important sa fascism is yung middle-class support na to ay organized at nagiging violent. Now, there was a period in the history of the Duterte administration na sa tingin ko, magiging pasista na ito nung sinusubukan nilang itayo yung Kilusang Pagbabago, which was a grassroots organized organization na ang goal ay protektahan lang si Rodrigo Duterte, and given how rabid some of his followers could be, there was a chance that this would turn violent. Pero alam natin na more or less hindi natuloy yung proyekto yun or napakaliit ng proyektong yun, so hindi natin siya matatawag na fascist kasi wala pa yung mass base. Karamihan talaga ng mga organized supporter ni Duterte ay mga mga within the formal political system pa rin, and hindi sila independent mass-based kagaya ng fascisti ni Benito Mussolini. And definitely, these people, to be fair to them, yung mga followers ni Digong, they don't go out on the streets, drag out people like me and my colleagues at Rappler and pour down castor oil down our gullets. So, talking about a very historically specific definition of fascism here. But if I can crack a joke a little bit or be slightly nagpapatawa or facetious, I think we can call Duterte an online fascist. Bakit? Kasi yung kanyang mga supporters, yung kanyang middle and lower middle class supporters online are very well organized. They are from the grassroots and they definitely are violent online. Kung meron sa inyo na troll na, and alam kong mas natrotroll yung mga babae kaysa sa mga lalaki na kagaya ko, definitely sasabihin nila that our president is an online fascist, but an on-the-ground real fascist. May elements. I can accept Professor Bello when he says there are elements, but not yet. I think it would be fair to use the term fascist for our President Duterte. Finally, is Rodrigo Duterte a populist? Again, medyo sinagot na namin ito ni Nicole before, but I'd categorically say yes. That is the one thing you can describe Duterte as, because he definitely separates the world into an elite and the rest. An elite that buttresses yung mga drug lords, an elite that supports corruption, yung mga dilawan, and an average person that needs to have his say. And you can see this in every facet of the Duterte government. You can see this in social media, di ba? When Mocha Uson, for example, speaks, I'm not a journalist, I'm just a regular person, that's really populism writ large. Or when some of his lawyers talk, they say, hindi kami galing sa top law schools like Ateneo and UP, pero mas mahal namin yung bayan kaysa dun sa mga experts, di ba? Or yung kanya mga media analysts, sasabihin nila, well, di rin kami galing sa mga big media organizations, hindi kami gano'n ka-edukado, pero mas mahal namin yung bayan dahil mas naiintindihan namin yung masa. Definitely, that rhetoric is populist, at yun yung rhetoric na talagang, I think, nag-i-endear kay Duterte sa karamihan ng kanyang mga followers. So, am I going to make a conclusion here? Wala gano'n sigurong conclusion. Make of this what you will. The only conclusion I want to make, very simple conclusion is, pag gumamit naman tayo ng mga termino, wag lang tayong bato ng bato. Alamin natin yung pinanggalingan nitong mga termino na to, and let's use it responsibly para pag nakipag-usap tayo sa kapwa natin Pilipino, hindi lang tayo nagsisloganeer at nagkakaintindihan tayo. That's all for today. Sana may nabasag na trip at sana may natutunan kayo. Thank you very much.